The first sign something was off came on a Tuesday morning, right around 6:15. I was in my car, coffee mug in hand, ready to pull out for my shift as a hospital technician. I hit the remote for my driveway gate like I had 1,000 times before. Nothing. No click. No hum. No movement. Just silence. I frowned, leaned out the window, hit the button again. Still nothing. Great, I muttered, climbing out. I checked the power box near the gate. Lights were green. I keyed in the manual override code on the side panel. Access denied. I blinked. That wasn't even supposed to be an option. It's my gate. My code. I tried again. Same message. I was late by the time I got the side gate open and backed my truck out manually. But the real gut punch came when I got home that evening and found a folded-up notice taped to my front door, another one of their lovely HOA memos. It appears to be operating against community guidelines. Please refrain from using unauthorized security systems. You have been documented and flagged for non-compliance. Flagged? Unauthorized? I installed that gate myself 6 years ago, well before the HOA even got their grubby hands on this neighborhood. My name is Isaac Pendell, and if there's one thing I hate more than paperwork at 6 a.m., it's someone telling me what I can and can't do on my own land. And the queen of this HOA circus? Nadine Elridge. Middle-aged, pinched expression, always in some pastel windbreaker and sneakers too clean to have ever touched grass. She came into power 3 years ago like a bad cold, unwanted and impossible to get rid of. I marched over to her place that evening, still in scrubs. She opened the door like she'd been waiting for me. Isaac, she said, eyes narrowing. I assume this is about your gate. Ding ding. Want to tell me why I've been locked out of my own property? She crossed her arms. Your gate is a violation. You know that. Security systems must be approved by the board. It's been there for 6 years. And the HOA's charter was updated last year. Page 13, paragraph 2. All existing security measures must be registered and subjected to safety reviews. Yours wasn't, because I didn't need to. Until you showed up with your charter. That doesn't explain why my code doesn't work. She gave me this fake sympathetic look like she was talking to a confused toddler. Maybe you should look into a technician. It's probably just malfunctioning. Yeah, right? So I did what any rational man would do. I called my friend Dominic. Dominic and I went to high school together. We were both misfits, but while I went the medical route, he dove headfirst into tech. Now he works with the state cyber crimes division. The guy could hack a vending machine if he wanted free snacks. I told him everything. He showed up the next day with a backpack full of gadgets and a grin like he was about to bust open a conspiracy. Let's see what they've been up to, he said, plugging into the gate's main board. Within 5 minutes, his expression changed. This isn't just a fried board, he muttered. Someone accessed this remotely. Like hard-coded override access. You didn't do this. I've never touched any of that since I installed it. Just the remote and the keypad. He tapped a few keys. There's a new admin code. And get this, your override code was blacklisted. That's not just tampering, man. That's deliberate. I felt the heat rise in my neck. Can you trace it? Already am. 15 minutes later, he turned the screen so I could see. There's a command log. It's pinging from a remote IP address, but I ran it through a local filter. You're gonna love this. Guess where it leads. I didn't even answer. HOA office router. Same one they use for their stupid monthly newsletters. The next day, I showed up at their meeting. I didn't bring a clipboard. I brought Dominic. The board was huddled around their usual folding table in the clubhouse, sipping bad coffee and pretending they were running a Fortune 500 company. Nadine spotted me and gave a tight smile. Mr. Pendell, she said, this is a closed meeting, unless you submitted a topic through the proper. Dominic interrupted. Actually, we're here to talk about illegal cyber interference on private property. That shut them up. I dropped a copy of the access log right on the table. This is a record of someone using the HOA office's internet to hack into my gate security system. You bypassed my access codes and locked me out. That's not a violation. That's a felony. Nadine's smile flickered. I'm sure there's some misunderstanding. We don't have anyone on staff capable of doing something like. Dominic pulled out a small USB stick. This has a full trace history, packet logs, IP verification, MAC address alignment. You've got timestamps matching your office hours. This wasn't some anonymous hacker. This was done from your system. And unless your printer suddenly got real smart, someone in this room is responsible. A board member, some guy with a comb-over and a nervous habit of adjusting his glasses, shifted in his seat. Nadine looked at him, then at me. "Well," she said, "if this is true, I'm sure it was an overstep, not a criminal act." Dominic tilted his head. "Tampering with private security infrastructure, especially one connected to a home, is covered under Title 18. That's federal. It's not just an overstep. It's prison time." The room went dead silent. I leaned forward. "You don't get to control my property with your little power games. And you sure as hell don't get to break the law doing it." Nadine tried to pivot. "Let's not be dramatic. If there was a technical issue, we'll issue a formal apology and—" "Nope," Dominic cut in. "This is already submitted to the state attorney's office. You'll be hearing from them soon." Nadine's face went pale. I turned to leave, but not before saying, "Oh, and by the way, my gate works just fine now, thanks to a real technician. Maybe you should get one before you try playing hacker next time." As we stepped out, Dominic looked over at me. "Think she'll try anything else?" I shook my head. "Not unless she wants matching bracelets." But I had a feeling Nadine wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The following Saturday, I was elbow deep in a busted water heater when I got the call. It wasn't Dominic. Isaac Pendell. The voice was clipped, precise. "Speaking. This is Special Agent Heather Lorne, Department of Homeland Security Cyber Division. I'd like to ask you a few questions regarding a hacking report submitted by one of our field consultants, Dominic Velez." I set down the wrench and wiped my hands. "Yeah, sure. I've got time now." "Good. I'll be by your residence in 20 minutes. Exactly 19 minutes later, a dark blue government sedan rolled up outside my fence. I recognized the make no decals, standard issue. The woman who stepped out was tall, sharp-featured, with a badge clipped to her belt and a black folder under one arm. She didn't bother with small talk. "Your friend submitted a full trace report showing unauthorized access from a network registered to your HOA's property management office," she said, scanning her notes. "That's consistent with a pattern we've been tracking: small-scale local administrations experimenting with unauthorized surveillance. We usually see this in gated communities with overzealous boards. Your case is the first with direct infrastructure sabotage." I motioned her inside. "You're telling me this isn't isolated?" She stepped over the threshold, eyes sweeping the room. "Not even close. It's just that most people don't notice until it escalates into extortion or privacy breaches." I led her to the garage, where Dominic had left a printout of the full packet log, along with the external IP trace and the command stack. She examined the data in silence for a few moments, then pulled out her phone and snapped a few photos. "This is enough to warrant an official investigation. I'll need to confiscate the security controller and any backup logs you've got. We'll label it evidence." I handed her the small drive Dominic had left behind, along with the controller module from the gate. "What happens now?" "We'll issue a subpoena for the HOA's internet records. If we find evidence linking any individual board members to this, they'll be charged under Title 18, Section 1030, unauthorized access of protected systems. That includes intent to control or manipulate personal property through unlawful intrusion." I folded my arms. "What about intent to intimidate? That's a secondary charge. If we find communications or meeting minutes showing premeditation, we can escalate to conspiracy." She paused at the door. "You should expect some pushback. These kinds of people usually think they're untouchable." I nodded. "They're about to find out they're not." The next time I saw Nadine Elridge, she wasn't in her usual pastel windbreaker. She was in a navy blazer, standing stiffly in front of the clubhouse while two agents wheeled out the HOA's desktop tower in a padded case. Her face had the color of wet chalk. I didn't bother waving. That evening, I got a visit from my neighbor Harold Tamber, retired postal worker. Lived 2 doors down. Always polite, always quiet. He stepped onto my porch with a manila folder and a hesitant expression. "I heard what happened," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "Didn't want to say anything before, but I think you might want to see this." He handed me the folder. Inside were printed emails, about a dozen, all between Nadine and someone named Craig Weller. I recognized the name. He was the new board appointee, the one who always wore cufflinks to community barbecues. The emails weren't vague. They discussed installing temporary overrides on resident systems to encourage compliance. One even mentioned my address specifically. Harold cleared his throat. "I volunteer at the library. Nadine asked me to scan some documents last week. and she left her flash drive behind. I saw these and made a copy. Didn't feel right. Figured with what's happening, you'd know what to do. I gripped the folder. You just saved this case 6 months of discovery work. The next morning, I handed the emails to Agent Lorne. She barely blinked before flipping open her phone. This confirms premeditated coordination, she said. Now it's no longer just unauthorized access, it's conspiracy to commit federal cyber crimes. Within 48 hours, Nadine and Craig were served official charges. I watched from my porch as 2 federal agents escorted them from their homes, no cuffs. Not yet, but the message was clear. The rest of the board scattered like cockroaches. But it wasn't over. The interim HOA president, a lanky guy named Mitchell who looked like he hadn't left a spreadsheet in 20 years, tried to smooth things over. We're conducting an internal review, he told me, knocking on my door with a practiced smile. We want to make amends with the community. I raised an eyebrow. You going to call off the fines too? He hesitated. Well, those are still under review. I pointed to the sidewalk. Then we're done here. He didn't come back. Later that week, I heard from Dominic again. He'd been working with Agent Lorne behind the scenes, and the picture that was forming wasn't just local corruption, it was systemic abuse of power. They weren't just messing with your gate, he said, sitting on my back steps with a soda in hand. They had a backdoor login to at least 6 other houses' smart systems. Thermostats, doorbells, even garage openers. I stared at him. Why? Control. Compliance. If someone ignored a notice, they'd freeze the thermostat remotely or send a fake maintenance alert. One guy had his sprinklers turned on at 2 in the morning for a week straight. I felt my stomach turn, and no one reported this. They didn't know it was the HOA. They thought it was glitches. Dominic handed me a printout. These people were building a digital leash, and you were the first one to tug back. I took the report and looked it over. It was chilling. Most of the residents weren't tech-savvy. They'd have no idea how to trace a spoofed command or a redirected IP. They'd just follow orders to avoid penalties. But now that system was dead in the water. The federal charges stuck. Nadine and Craig were indicted on 4 counts each. The judge denied early dismissal when the emails Harold provided were entered into evidence. The prosecution's statement was blunt. This was not neighborhood governance. This was coercion through unlawful surveillance infrastructure. The fallout was immediate. Residents demanded a special election. The HOA's entire structure was dissolved under court order pending investigation. The clubhouse was closed. The community newsletter stopped arriving. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't see a single laminated notice taped to my door. And then something unexpected happened. People started talking to each other again. Not through official meetings or curated events, just on sidewalks, over fences, across driveways. Harold organized a cookout. The couple across the street brought out folding chairs and a cooler. Someone brought a speaker. No one asked for permits. That night, as I stood on my lawn watching kids chase each other between parked cars, Harold came up beside me. Feels like a neighborhood again, he said. I nodded. We just had to cut the wires tying us down. He chuckled. You know, when this all started, I thought you were nuts for pushing back. But now? You were the only one sane enough to see the rot. I looked around. Lights on. Music playing. No patrols. No notices. Just people being people. Sometimes, I said, it takes a little fire to clear the deadwood. And judging by the way things were growing now, we weren't going back to the way things were. Not ever. 3 weeks after the indictments, I got a letter not from the HOA, but from the county clerk's office. The envelope was heavy, official. Inside was a notice of subpoena. I was being called to testify as a witness in the case against Nadine Elridge and Craig Weller. The trial had moved fast. With the emails Harold provided and Dominic's digital trace logs, the U.S. Attorney's Office had fast-tracked the charges. But it wasn't just a cyber crimes case anymore. A forensic audit of the HOA's finances had unearthed something deeper: embezzlement, to the tune of nearly $200,000 over the past 18 months. The money trail led straight from the HOA's maintenance fund into shell accounts tied to a defunct landscaping company Craig had registered under a false name. That's when the FBI got involved. I walked into the courtroom on a foggy Monday morning. Federal building, top floor. Not the kind of place you see unless you've either done something very wrong or very right. The judge was a broad-shouldered woman with silver hair and a voice that could snap glass. The prosecution team wore tailored suits and didn't waste time. They presented the access logs, the email chain, and the financial records with the kind of precision that makes people sweat through their coats. When I took the stand, the prosecutor, a young guy named Mason with a jaw like a cinder block, asked me to describe the morning my gate stopped working. I kept it simple, factual. Just the timeline, the response, Dominic's discovery. Then he handed me a printout. Can you confirm this is the access log provided by your technician friend? I scanned it. Yeah, that's the one. Shows the override command sent from the HOA's IP. And did you authorize anyone to access your gate system remotely? Not even once. He nodded and stepped back. No further questions. The defense tried to twist it. Their lawyer, a wiry man with thin hair and a habit of speaking like he was narrating a movie trailer, argued that the HOA had been experimenting with new security integration tools, and that no harm was intended. I looked him dead in the eye. They locked me out of my own home system without permission and wrote me up for it. That's not integration. That's sabotage. The judge didn't blink. Sustained. Witness may step down. After I gave my testimony, I sat in the gallery next to Harold, who'd also been called. He wore a pressed flannel and held a thermos like it was a shield. When the financial evidence was entered into the record, his grip tightened. The prosecutor displayed an account summary showing transfers from the HOA maintenance fund into a company listed as Green Horizon Services. On paper, it was a landscaping firm. In reality, it had no employees, no equipment, and no service records. What's wild, Harold muttered under his breath, is they didn't even bother to change the routing number between accounts. That's just lazy. After court adjourned, Mason caught up to me in the hallway. There's a sentencing hearing in a few weeks, he said. We're recommending the maximum for both, especially given the conspiracy charges. But there's something else you should know. I raised an eyebrow. More skeletons? He opened his briefcase and handed me a sealed envelope. We found internal memos suggesting they were planning to install surveillance on select homes through maintenance inspections. Hidden cameras disguised as motion sensors, targeting residents who'd complained or resisted fines. I opened the envelope. Inside was a scan of one of the memos. It had Nadine's name at the bottom, dated just 2 months before the whole gate incident. They were going to install them next quarter, Mason continued. Yours was at the top of the list. I stared at the paper. You think they actually got any installed? We're checking. So far, no hard proof. But we're recommending a federal injunction against the HOA conducting any inspections or service calls until the investigation's complete. That night, I replaced every sensor and camera on my property. Spent 6 hours rewiring everything, triple-checked my network. Dominic did a remote scan to sweep for anything unknown. Nothing pinged, but I didn't feel safe not yet. The next morning, a knock at the door startled me. It was Mitchell, the interim president. He looked like he'd been sleeping in a broom closet. Shirt wrinkled, eyes baggy, voice hoarse. I'm resigning, he said. Won't waste your time. This house of cards is collapsing, and I don't want to be underneath it when it hits the ground. I leaned on the doorframe. You come here for absolution or just to announce the obvious? Neither. I came to warn you. There's a subset of members' old board loyalists. They're trying to form a new private committee to restructure the HOA from outside the official framework. Private contracts, neighborhood watch, that kind of thing. I narrowed my eyes. You're saying they're going rogue? More like they're rebranding. They've already met twice. Quiet meetings at the old rec center, off the books. I crossed my arms. And what do they want? To take back control. They think Nadine was just overzealous, and that the real problem was too much centralization. They want to make it more grassroots. Which means what, clipboard patrols and driveway audits with flashlights? He didn't smile. I'm just telling you what I heard. They're calling it the Civic Order Initiative. Sounds friendly. It's not. I watched him walk away. The very next day, I started organizing. Not a counter committee. Not a neighborhood watch. Just people. Real people. We set up weekly gatherings on the Greenbelt. No titles. No agendas. Just a place to talk and share information. Dominic helped me build a private server where residents could post questions, updates, or alert each other to any suspicious activity. No moderators. No filters. Just truth. Within a week, over 40 homes had joined. Then came the anonymous flyers. Slipped under doors. Taped to stop signs. Left in mailboxes without postage. Concerned citizens for civic order, they read, in bold serif font. Promised to restore balance to the community. Invited residents to a discussion forum at the rec center. I went. I didn't go to listen. I went to record. The room was dimly lit, chairs arranged in a semicircle. No name tags. No introductions. Just vague chatter about re-establishing standards and restoring community pride. But when one man, a rail-thin guy with a stiff collar and a voice like gravel, started talking about privately enforcing compliance through third-party evaluators, I hit record on my phone. When they distributed the new Code of Values pamphlet, I took two. At the bottom of the second page was a disclaimer in fine print. By participating in this initiative, residents agree to third-party monitoring through civic orders-approved oversight partners. I walked out. The next morning, I turned everything over to Agent Lorne. She arrived within the hour. "This is a new front," she said, flipping through the pamphlet. "Same agenda, different branding. But now they're trying to operate as a private security consultancy. That's a whole different jurisdiction. We'll handle it." I dropped the second pamphlet onto the table. "They're doing this because they know they lost the HOA. They're trying to build a shadow version." She nodded. "Then we'll treat it like an unlicensed surveillance operation." Which it is. 2 days later, every flyer vanished. The rec center canceled all private bookings pending inspection, and the so-called Civic Order Initiative disbanded before it could even file a business license. The sentencing hearing came and went. Nadine got 8 years. Craig got 10. Both were ordered to pay full restitution to the neighborhood fund. The judge included a permanent injunction. Neither could hold any position of authority in any residential organization again, anywhere in the state. But the real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It was in the way the neighborhood changed. We painted over the faded HOA signs, took down the ugly bulletin board by the mailbox cluster, replaced the clubhouse locks, and turned it into a community library. Harold started a book exchange. The couple across the street turned their garage into a woodworking co-op. Kids rode scooters down the sidewalk again. No one asked for permission. No one needed it. One evening, I sat on my porch watching the sun dip below the tree line. Dominic pulled up, stepped out with a grin, and handed me a small metal plate. Laser etched on it were the words, "Property protected by community, not control." I screwed it onto the gate myself. No codes, no overrides, just trust. And a reminder that no matter how deep the rot goes, a neighborhood belongs to the people who live in it, not the ones who try to control it. 3 months after the trial, things had nearly settled into a new rhythm. No board meetings. No passive-aggressive newsletters. The neighborhood felt like someone had finally opened a window and let the stale air out. Residents were getting involved in ways they never had before, volunteering, helping seniors with yard work, even organizing weekend cleanups. The power vacuum left behind by the HOA wasn't filled with chaos like some had feared. It was filled with accountability. But then a letter arrived. Not in the mailbox, no return address, no postage. It was slid under my workshop door, tucked in a plain envelope. Inside were 2 blurry photographs, one of me walking out of the federal building after the trial, and another taken from across the street, showing me unloading groceries into my garage. The back of one photo had a single line typed in red ink. "Some cages shouldn't be rattled." I stood there, staring at the words, the paper trembling slightly between my fingers. It wasn't a threat in the legal sense, but it didn't need to be. I brought the envelope to Dominic that same evening. He was in his garage, soldering a circuit board. He didn't look up when I walked in. "You get something weird dropped off?" I handed it to him. He studied the photos, then flipped them over. His expression turned unreadable. "Someone's trying to scare you into silence. Whoever it is, they're not done playing." He walked over to a steel cabinet, pulled out a flat black case, and opened it to reveal a compact surveillance scanner. "Give me a few hours. I'll check your perimeter. If they've been close enough to take these, there's a signal trail." By midnight, he had a list of 3 devices that had pinged near my property over the last 48 hours. One belonged to a local contractor. One was a delivery van. The last one, a burner phone. Location data showed the burner had parked 30 feet from my fence line, then moved 3 blocks south before disappearing. The timestamps lined up with the photos. "I'm going to run it through a triangulation tool," Dominic said, typing furiously. "Might take a few days, but if they used it again anywhere near a tower, I'll find it." The next morning, I filed a formal report with the county sheriff. The deputy who took my statement jotted everything down with a neutral expression, but when I handed him the photos, he paused. "We've had 2 other residents report surveillance recently," he said. "Same kind of thing, photos, no return address, no identifying marks. We're treating it as stalking. If this is coordinated, it's a bigger issue." He promised to elevate the report to the state investigator assigned to the HOA's financial case. That was one comfort: the legal system hadn't abandoned us after the trials. They were still watching. Later that week, Dominic called me at work. "I got a match," he said. "Burner phone connected to a Bluetooth device at a storage facility just outside town. Registered under a fake name. Guess who rented the unit?" I waited. Elias Hargrove, one of Nadine's old board members. I didn't recognize the name at first, but then I remembered a quiet, balding man who handled the HOA's tech support. He rarely spoke at meetings, never raised a fuss. Just clicked away on his laptop and nodded when Nadine told him to. "He never got charged," I said. "No, but he was deep in the infrastructure side. Probably the one who built the override system. I'm guessing he backed off after the trial, went underground. But now he's trying to revive something. If he's been watching me, he probably thinks I'm a threat to whatever he's planning." "You are." That same night, Dominic and I drove out to the storage facility. We didn't go inside, just parked across the street with a long lens camera and waited. At exactly 9:22, a silver sedan pulled in. The driver got out, looked around, and punched in the access code. Lights flicked on inside the unit. Dominic snapped 15 photos. "Got him." We turned everything over to Agent Lorne the next morning. She'd stayed attached to the case, having taken a personal interest after the trial. She reviewed the photos, the signal logs, and the burner phone data. "This crosses into federal harassment," she said. "And if he's storing equipment tied to a previously investigated HOA operation, it puts him in violation of the injunction. I'll get a warrant." 2 days later, the unit was raided. Inside, they found more than surveillance equipment. There were dozens of files, names, addresses, photos taken from private cameras. A hand-drawn map of the neighborhood with red circles around specific homes. USB drives labeled with resident initials. And in one corner, a dismantled server rig that matched the firmware from the original HOA override system. Worse, they found a new prototype. A small, modular device designed to latch onto smart doorbell systems and siphon footage in real time. No alerts. No logs. Just quiet data theft. Hargrove was arrested that same evening. The charges were stacked: violation of federal injunction, illegal surveillance, attempted unauthorized access to protected networks, and conspiracy to commit digital intrusion. Agent Lorne called me personally. "Looks like Nadine wasn't the brain behind the operation," she said. "She was just the front. Hargrove built the bones. And he didn't stop after she went down, he just went dark." Any idea what he was trying to do with the data? Unclear, but with how detailed the files were, it looks like he was building leverage. Planning to blackmail residents into funding a new private oversight body. We found draft contracts in his storage unit. Some of them had your name on them. That hit harder than I expected. He wasn't just reviving the HOA, he was weaponizing it. 3 weeks later, the neighborhood held a public meeting at the converted clubhouse. No agenda, no board, just a gathering of residents who'd had enough of being watched, manipulated, and controlled. I stood at the front with Harold and Dominic. "We stopped them twice," I said. "Once in the open, and once in the shadows. But this can't be about just reacting anymore. We need to make sure something like this can't take root again." Harold raised a hand. "So what's the plan?" "We form a residents' union. Not an HOA. No authority, no fines, no board. Just a legal entity that exists to protect our rights. If someone tries to start another oversight group, we'll have the legal weight to challenge it." Dominic added, "I can set up a private intranet to keep everyone informed. No data harvesting. No ads. Just information." People started nodding. A woman from the corner volunteered to draft the bylaws. A few others offered to fund the startup fees. Within an hour, the motion passed unanimously. The documents were filed 2 days later. The Residents' Mutual Advocacy Group was born. No officers, only stewards. No enforcement, only education. Every household could vote on decisions, and all financial records would be publicly accessible. It wasn't just a new model. It was the antidote. A month after Hargrove's arrest, I got a letter. This time, it was official. "Dear Mr. Pendell, Due to your instrumental role in exposing unlawful digital surveillance operations connected to the former HOA, the Department of Justice is awarding you the Community Cyber Integrity Recognition for Civilian Assistance. I read the letter twice, then pinned it to my workshop wall next to the old gate override module, the one Dominic had pulled apart when this whole mess started. The gate still worked, by the way, but now it wasn't locked by codes or overrides. It was guarded by a community that had learned the hard way what happens when power goes unchecked. And I wasn't just the guy who pushed back. I was the one who made sure no one could ever push again.